Right. Welcome back to Advent of Fortran. Today is December 9th. That means it's time for day 4. My GitHub repository is here. This link will be in the description. So let's dive into day 4. What are the elves up to today? Bear with me while I awkwardly read this in silence. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My other computer woke up and it was making fan noise, so I had to shut it down. My last video was entirely polluted with noise from those fans. So I'd like to avoid that today. This seems easy enough. Just find ranges that contain other ranges. And it could either be, so basically there's a first elf and a second elf. And the first elf could contain the second elf, or the second elf could contain the first elf. So it's an asymmetric relation and both of them count. Let's get the input. This is day 4, so let's make day 4. Yesterday I wrote up day 3 from scratch. Today I'm just going to copy day 3 and use that as a template for day 4 after I delete most of the body of day 3. That's going to save me a lot of boilerplate, like creating the module, subroutine, and main program, just to save me typing. Eventually I might make an actual template file which I copy instead of copying the previous day's solution, but this is the basic idea. So copy day 3 to day 4, go into day 4, clean out the old inputs, not that. So I can clean out all of these functions. They're not going to be reused. I'm going to leave the body of the subroutine that reads the file, but I'll delete all of that other junk, and then I'll delete part 2. Part 2 is going to get created after I finish part 1. And download my inputs. So this is the actual input. This is the test input. Actually, I'd like to leave that open. Let me check the input too. Okay, formatting is the same. Now let's get to the solution. So part 2 doesn't exist. This should read the file and print every line in the file. And it does just that. I get a lot of warnings from unused variables from things that I didn't delete from day 3, but it reads the file and prints everything. I want to make sure I don't have any off by 1 errors. Does it print every line? It does. That's everything. So let's get rid of these unused variables. Probably make something called n again eventually. I'm going to keep isum actually because that's going to be my answer. The answer is almost always a sum of some type. Here it's the number of elf sections that contain other sections, so that's a sum. I'm going to leave this variable named sum. And is that all of the unused variables? Yeah, no warnings now. Good, we're getting a clean compilation without any warnings. That's what I like. Now we need to parse these numbers. Some of them can be multiple digits in the real input. Like here we have 2-digit numbers, there might be 3-digit numbers, and so on. So let's parse that. So I think it makes sense to not read this as a string. I think these can be read fairly easily in Fortran with the list directed input or whatever it's called. Basically it's going to be 4 integers. Let's call these, there are 2 elves in each line of input, so let's call this elf A and this elf B. And then B is going to have a lower range and an upper range or a high range. And elf B has a lower range and an upper range. So going to call these A low, A high, B low, and B high. I don't like to type, so I use short variable names. That's my style. And we're going to be reading whatever format. A low, A high, B low, B high. And then let's print those. With some delimiters. Will that work? I really don't know. Nope. that did not read correctly. Will Fortran let me do that? No. It needs the width. Is it complaining about the integer or the delimiter? This is kind of annoying. Like, I don't want to assume the length of the integer because it could be 1 character or multiple characters. That website sucks. How's this one? See, this is printing, this is not reading. You'd think that I would know how to do this, but off the top of my head, I don't. What was happening when I just read star? Basically, it read nothing. So, why does it not at least read the first one? This is so annoying. Like, I don't know the width of the integer. Do I have to parse this character by character? So first it says non-negative, so I put I0, and 0 is definitely non-negative. And then it says positive, so like, make up your mind, G Fortran. Does it have to be non-negative or does it have to be positive? Apparently it has to be positive, but that's not what the first error message says. So that's super annoying. I already looked at this page, didn't I? Why does star not work? Fortran like white space? Yeah, so it can't read numbers with the default formatting unless it's delimited by white space. So I have to parse this one character at a time. Tell me more, Oracle. Yeah, I think I have to parse this one character at a time. It's taken me a long time to come to that realization because I really didn't want to do that live. It's a little bit embarrassing. So, going to bring back my string variable and read the whole line as a string and then read from the string. So I read into the string s, and then I read the integers from the string. I think this is going to be the same thing as before. It's going to be all zeros. No, with that it works because I didn't write this. I edited my input and then did not undo the edits. Yeah, so it doesn't like that, but it does get the string. Bad integer. Yeah, I know. It's going to be the same thing, right? Yeah. Positive width. So, now I need to read character by character. To get an integer. I think I want a function for that, and I'll probably end up reusing it in further advents of code. So I need the string, and I need an index specifying which character or how many characters from the string have been parsed so far. I'm going to be lazy and make two unrelated variables for that. is is the index into the string s. So, do I want to start with 0? Yeah, I'll start with 0 instead of 1, and then I'll increment it first thing. There might be some better way to just read this straight from the file that I'm missing right now, but I'm live on stream, so give me a break. I'm going to do it this way. So it's going to take a string and an index into a string and read int. Okay, I'll just use the default. I want this to be a function. S is a string. Is is an integer. So the first thing we're going to do is increment because it starts from 0, and then it's going to increment past the last character that was read when I call this subsequent times. Will this work as a function, or does it need to be a subroutine? Because basically I have multiple out arguments. Okay, so that does something. I'm not particularly interested in that yet because I haven't actually implemented the read int subroutine. I just want to make sure is getting incremented and saved. Okay, so it's incremented inside the function and then that gets passed out, so it's 1 outside of the function. I just wanted to verify that. This is what you're supposed to do in Fortran. I didn't do this yesterday, but you should declare whether your arguments are intended as input arguments or output arguments, or both in and out. So now I need to keep reading until I get to the end of the integer. And you cannot read past the end of the string. Doesn't really, again, like yesterday, it doesn't really matter whether I use len or len trim, because actually, yeah, it does matter. I think the way that Fortran works is when you read something into a fixed length string, it's going to be padded with spaces. It could be padded with something else, but it's certainly not going to be padded with numeric characters, and I need to implement this numeric function, by the way, in case you're wondering about that. So check out yesterday's video for a discussion of len versus len trim, but I'm going to use len trim just to be safe. So basically keep reading until you get to the end of numeric characters, or you go past the end of the string, and then, well, we can't just return, we need to read a number from the string. So read from string s, and we're going to be reading from a substring, and I need to keep track of where this index was at the beginning. So save it there, and then we're going to be reading from this substring from s, default formatting because I don't know what, I actually do know what the width is, but it's a pain to get that integer into a format statement. You should check the IO status even for this read, but I'm not going to bother with that for advent of code. So read the return value. And let's see if that works. I bet it doesn't, because I didn't implement that function yet. This is a logical function. In Fortran, we have logical instead of Boolean. That's just what it's called. So this is going to return true for numeric characters and false for any other character. And it works on one character at a time, not a string. Check out yesterday's video for where I compared alphabetic ASCII characters, A through Z, uppercase and lowercase. This time it's going to be, this could be a one-liner. Yeah, that's it. I was about to do this with if then, like if this is true, return true, but that's just a one-liner. So this might not compile because I didn't declare anything. I want parentheses there. Ah, yeah, that's not the right intent. So is0 is a local variable. That means it doesn't have an intent. I like to put a little delimiter between the argument declarations and the local variable declarations, just like I do between functions. That's my style. Right. So I can't start this with 0. But then should this be less than or equal? No, I think it should still be less than. No, it should be. And then I'd read to is minus 1, because this is going, the final, like at the end of this line, it's going to read the character 8. This is going to be true, and this is going to be true. So then is is going to be the length of this line plus 1. So then I need to read only up until the length plus 1 minus 1. So up until the length of the string. So it's getting the first character 2 to 5. Okay, I was looking at is. I don't really care about is anymore. 2 to 5, 2, 6, 2. It's reading the first character. Let's see if it can read the other characters. A low, A high, B low, B high, and then let's print all of them. Hopefully that gets the end of the line, like I was just discussing, and it doesn't. What went wrong? Was I off by 1? So if I call this and it fails to read an integer, okay, so at the very beginning of this function, I need to skip everything that's not an integer. So I need to skip the delimiters, and it's crashing as soon as I try to read the second number, because I didn't implement that. And I still save is0 here because I care about the start of the integer. I don't care if there are delimiters before the integer in the string. And there should be some checking in here if the line ends with delimiters instead of a number. I think I'm not going to bother with that. That's a bunch of stuff. Two, 4, 6, 8, 2, 6, 4, 8. That looks correct. I can clean this up a little bit. Do I want to? No, I'm not going to bother with it. It's kind of nice that these are lined up, so I'll leave that as is. Alright, I've parsed the file. Now I have to actually figure out which sections contain other sections. That part sounds fairly easy. I'll be bold enough to make that proclamation right now. Let's see how many stupid mistakes I make in the implementation. So, I'm going to make another function. Contains. That's already a keyword. Contain. Okay. The conjugation. I want it to look like if A contains B, or does A contain B. But contains is already a keyword, so I'll call this function contain. So personally, I think this function is self-explanatory. I think this function is self-explanatory, so I didn't put any comments. I'll put a comment in this function. So this is going to tell us, does the range A contain the range B? These are all integers. And this function is not symmetric. It's going to tell us if A contains B. It's not going to tell us if B contains A. So to handle that case, I'm going to call this function twice with the arguments swapped with B first instead of A. But the function is not going to handle that symmetry. Again, this can be a one-liner. Just like isNum. IsNum is a one-liner. This is also going to be a one-liner. So that means the lower bound of A, they can be equal. Like in this case, 6 isn't in the middle of the range, it's on the edge of this range. So we're going to use less than or equal here. So the lower bound of A has to be below the lower bound of B. And the upper bound of A has to be above the upper bound of B. I think that's right. This would work, but if it helps your readability, you can put a parenthesis around that return value so you can see this is a logical value and it's getting assigned. This is the assignment operator. It's not a logical comparison. So this logical value is getting assigned to this variable. It works with or without the parentheses, but if that helps your readability, I'll leave it like that for a second. And we just want to sum up how many of these containments exist. So if A contains B, we're going to increment the sum. Or, for the other case, if B contains A, also increment the sum. There could be a case where, like, if they're both 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, A contains B and B contains A. It's not clear to me from the amount of this text that I've skimmed whether or not that would count as 2 containments or 1 containment. I guess I'll just try it and see. So, like, if this is true and this is true, do I increment twice or do I only increment once? I don't know. Part 1, it's 2 for the test. And what is it for the real input? It crashes. That's not what I wanted to uncomment. I wanted to comment that. So it's saying there are 470 containments. Is it right? That's not the right answer. So let's make these exclusive. Do I get a different answer? Yeah. So I think there were 20 cases where A contained B and B contained A. Digits. I have to wait 1 minute until I submit another answer, so I was going to see if I could do some fancy Vim regex searching to find the lines where they're all equal, but let's just see if this is right. I think it's probably been a minute. Get in. Let's pretend that I got that right on the first try. I didn't read the whole thing, so maybe they said that that only counts as 1, but it really wasn't clear to me whether that counts as 1 or 2, so I'm going to claim that this mistake wasn't my fault. Alright, let's check out part 2. That sounds easy enough. Like, this is straight up trivial. It's day 4, like these should be ramping up in difficulty a little bit. So we're going to copy part 1 to part 2, and instead of a contain function, we're going to have an overlap function. And this is going to be somebody's walking their dog outside, checking it out through my window. So if the lower bound of A, I care if the upper bound or the lower Is that right? Did I use all four? A, H, A, L, B, L, B, H. And this should still be less than or equal because they say a single section overlap still counts. And this function is named overlap. And this is part 2. Is that it? I just did part, yeah, I have to call the new function. Let's try it. Why am I printing all this stuff? I don't want to print all of that stuff. So same thing, 304. Let's see if it's right. Did I get the test input correct, at least? It should be 4. Yeah, I got the test correct. I got these comparisons backwards. Should be greater than there and less than or equal to there. Wow, I'm terrible at this. This is symmetric now, so I should only have to call this once. Maybe I got these right. The upper bound. De Morgan. This is just random walk programming at this point. Come on, man. Parentheses are unnecessary. Part 2. What? What the hell did I do here? Oh. It's easier to check if they don't overlap. So in that case, I think left and right might be mirrored on my webcam here, but let's say lower bound of A, upper bound of A, lower bound of B, upper bound of B. If the upper bound of A is less than, not less than or equal, but less than the lower bound of b, then they don't overlap, or they could be switched this way. So there's going to be two things with an or. So if the upper bound of a is less than the lower bound of b, or the upper bound of b is less than the lower bound of a, then they don't overlap, so we negate it to find out if they do overlap. I hope that's right. That's a lot. Didn't they say I was too high already? Oh, my answer was too low. Okay, so maybe I got it right now. Let's see. Get in. I was hoping part 2 there was easy enough that I wouldn't make any mistakes in the implementation, but I went through that way too fast without really thinking about it. So that's it for day 4. Gonna commit this. Add the source file and the input and the test input. I have a module and an executable which are ignored by the get ignored, but I've added the source code and the input files. So let's use a consistent commit message, add day 4. Push it. Let's verify that it's pushed. There it is. So that's it for day 4. Like I said last time, I'm probably not going to make it through the entire advent of code. These might get so difficult that I just don't feel like doing them while I'm on a holiday. So I'm not sure if I'll get through these at all, and there's a very good chance that even if I do, I'm not going to feel like streaming all of these. So I'll see you if I see you. But for now, I'll catch you next time.